Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and it's early and my voice is still not quite here. So good morning or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today, our podcast is Big Feelings in Little People at Christmas. And perhaps you find yourself in this slow or fast descent towards Christmas Day, and there's loads of activities and there's school finishing and there's loads of junk food and lots of excitement and nervous system dysregulation. And perhaps as a parent, you're finding that you are coming across more tantrums or more resistant behavior, and maybe that's really hard for you right now. So in this episode, we're going to talk around a few little pointers for you to remember that help you help them get through Christmas.
Yeah, I've been talking to so many people, and this is so true for them, and also for me in my home. Like, I noticed my kids, and my biggest is kind of big energy, excitement next level, and so then everybody kind of feeds off that. And so I think it's helpful for us all to have this reminder at this time of year that there's a lot going on for our little kids, and how can we kind of help them and help us through it.
Yeah, definitely. I also at this time imagine there's a lot of stuff going on for big kids too, who perhaps finished VCE.
Yeah.
Or are looking at what their results or their life are post 2 years of lockdown and trying to do school and work out where they want to be for the rest of their life. So I also just want to acknowledge that if you're a parent of big people too, that there's probably a lot going on for them as well.
Yeah, and then they're thrust in these environments, and I'm sure that you'll remember this as a kid, when some long lost auntie would say, "Now, how is school?" And ask you all of these questions that feel like they have no reference to who you really are. And so children also are dealing with the dysregulation that comes up in that too, of being around people they don't know, and our either conscious explicit expectations of them or our implied expectations of them to fit into new environments or different environments. And so how that plays out in our children too. I find my kids, after an event like that, they kind of need a day after of slow and coming back into the home, and flicking off each other whatever they're holding as well from that event. And so just maybe for you as a mum, you need the reminder too, to less is more. In this last week lead up to Christmas, or few days, less is more. Because if ideally you don't want to run into Christmas Day with your kids already exhausted.
Yeah.
Because it's going to go pear-shaped even more quickly. With the lack of sleep, with the high sugar, with all of the, day after the other. And we have we kind of often have a 2 or 3 day Christmas, it runs for a few days. And so even now I'm with my kids, you're going to bed earlier. No, I know, no, you're not staying up. Things like that to help them kind of be somewhat rested as we move into that time.
Yes.
It's tricky here with daylight saving and the excitement to bring that down for kids, but I think it can help you and it can help them when we do that and kind of have that like in our line of sight.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm big on sleep is everything, right? Like it doesn't matter what else you're doing. If you're not getting good quality sleep, it's pretty hard to function in a regulated way.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. I often think sleep is the first place that I start before I would look at anything else for anything that.
Yeah, because so many things self-resolve if you get enough sleep.
Yeah. And I just want to say, we recently bought Lola, so my child who has additional needs, we recently just bought her a weighted blanket. And that has been a freaking game changer for us.
I am literally so excited to buy one of these.
Just while we're on the topic of sleep, because she has always been, she loves sleep. She, is a big sleeper. And I always assumed, she kind of is always that sort of the slower, harder to get moving kind of person. But sleep has always been an issue for her. So for a low tone, she had sleep apnea because everything was collapsing at night. So we went through the process of dealing with that and it got better and she was a little bit less tired. But it's always been this, it takes her probably 2 hours to wind down at night. So she'd be in her bed tossing and turning and like she was the one that always somehow her doona would come out of its doona cover every single night. And I'd be like, what is happening? So anyway, I thought I'm going to try this weighted blanket thing because she's doing OT and the OT uses a lot of you can also, if you don't want to get the weighted blanket, you can get these like Lycra bands almost that go like wrap around your mattress like a band and they slide under that like a sheet. So all you're looking at for down regulation is biofeedback. So it's this compression and pressure on the physical body that reminds them, come down, be here, you're safe. And so I had watched in my daughter's OT sessions how extraordinary that was for connecting her to her body and reducing her anxiety. So I thought she's in a bunk, so it was too hard for me to get up there and organize the sheet that wraps around. If she was on a bottom bed, I probably would have done that. So I thought I'd try a weighted blanket. Now, she's a big kid, obviously, we're big people. So I ended up with the 9 kilo one, got the glass bead one, so it's not hot. And I kid you not, she goes to sleep in 5 minutes now.
It's an absolute revelation.
Like, Nick and I still stand there and go, what is this? This is amazing. And so she is sleeping better. And as a naturopath, I always learn every hour pre-midnight was worth 2 post-midnight in terms of restoration for the physical body. So she's just gained 4 hours of restoration for herself or her nourishment. She's waking up earlier in the morning. So I always assumed she liked to sleep in, but of course she's going to bed later. So she's waking up later in the morning. Now she's going to sleep earlier. She's up now with everybody at 7 o'clock in the morning and she's sprightly. And I'm like, wow, this is a game changer. So just while we're on the topic, consider what you can do to offer your children the best restoration for sleep because it changes what you have to parent the next day.
Which is huge, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you told me about this at the best time too because of my 5-year-old's going to school next year and she's like Lola. So she tosses and turns. She's the last one to go to sleep, often won't fall asleep till 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Like she is like stays up late. Yeah. And so we're sometimes waking her at 8:15, 9 o'clock it was the other day, which is just not going to roll, right? Like it's just not going to roll with school. And so this sounds like such a good solution for kids like that, like the kids who have, more sensitivity in the nervous system and need assistance.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I don't know if it's for everyone. Obviously, it's not for everyone. But I do think it's worth a shot because it has been so significant for us, which then changes how much sleep she's getting, which I have to say this is the first Christmas that I'm not experiencing like major meltdowns because she's normally like highly emotional. She's usually my most dysregulated child. And this year she's not. And I just think, honestly, it's sleep.
That's bloody amazing.
I don't think it's good parenting. Just sleep.
And I mean, it's one of those things we can look past. It's particularly like, in this conscious parenting, gentle parenting kind of paradigm, we can look past the foundations and think, oh gosh, I'm missing something. Or, oh gosh, there's a problem with my child's behavior that I need to fix or help them through or hold space for. But, what about if it is the coming back to basics, which leads me to the next thing, which you and I are talking about, because I was explaining about Pearl last night. She had a rotten sleep, really agitated. And I was like, I'm saying to Julie, I think it's a UTI. I'm just the way she was. And Julie's like, well, what if it's worms? And I'm like, oh God, penny drop. I haven't wormed the children for ages. And so that's another quick go-to, like, because she, you know, as you said, like, she's got a parasite, she's going to be parasitic in her behavior.
Yeah, they behave like parasites. Yeah. Yeah. I know that might sound a little bit offensive, but from a naturopathic perspective, you can almost see it play out in their behavior, which I just find fascinating.
So it's just another thing that yes, this is going to bring up bigger feelings this time of year with our children, but if it feels like unusual, like, you know, quite a big shift, then also because of this time of year where they're often, you know, at public places, they're around lots of kids, there's, you know, moving in through environments quickly, there could be also that. There could also be that they've picked up more germs, their body's dealing with a load of parasite or whatever.
Yeah.
So that could be an option too. So that's what I'm going to buy today, is some wormy tablets.
Yeah, I just want to say to people, because often it's one that we miss. So just getting your basic wormer from the chemist just actually starves the worms of glucose. So that's the only effect that drug has, and it's instantaneous and it moves through their body and the worms essentially can't feed, so they die. That's how that works. So if you're looking at long-term healthcare for worms, then you'll be looking at a significantly reduced sugar diet, you'd be looking at gut health, and you'd be looking at diatomaceous earth as a daily supplement. Diatomaceous earth, if you're wanting a daily supplement for worms, if you're finding your kids pick them up often, is an absolute game changer. So my sister used to just mix it into juice for her kids and they'd have it that way. I used to put it in smoothies and they'd have it that way. And if we're going through a period where people seem to be getting worms more frequently, I come back to that as a practice. But just remember, this time of year, we're more active, eating more sugar-based foods that we would normally not eat in our diet. And that's a fantastic breeding ground for parasites. So we largely always have them in our system, but whether they colonize in greater numbers or are able to be kept at bay is the only difference that we're looking at.
It's almost like the tipping point, like, you know, if it tips too much and they're out of balance, and this is when we're going to start to see the beginning.
Right. Yeah. And you won't see worms in stool until it's a major infestation. What you will see is your children becoming more like, you know, a parasite. They're angry, they lash out, they're more like, you know, they kind of have these like parasite ears, if you could cartoon do them, moments. Usually they're going to be writhing in their bodies in different ways, and often you'll see that at night as they're preparing for bed or lying down for bed. And because worms travel at night, and also worms travel the most on full moons. This might freak some people out.
Oh, that makes sense.
Oh,
it's a full moon. It's a full moon.
Oh, is it?
Last night, yeah, we're on a full moon. Yeah.
I think it might be worms.
I think it's worms.
Yeah.
It's just diagnosed.
Well, it's just so interesting to me. Like, worms are some of the creepiest things, but on full moons, they literally will travel through tissues. So sometimes you can see them through the surface of your skin. Some have heard stories of people seeing them, you know, through their eyeball or down the back of their throat, or like they literally, worms on a full moon travel through tissues in the body. Like, they eat their way through tissues. You can literally see them move under skin, which is really freaky. You can also at night, if you wanted to, and I did do this when my first two were older and I was just trying to work out my whole footprint on what the worm situation was. If it's a completely black room and your kids have got no pants on, obviously this is a consent-based thing and a curiosity if they're up for it, and you get a flash torch and you kind of flip their legs up and you flash torch, you'll actually see them exiting the anus. Because that's what they do. They exit the anus and they plant eggs around the anus. So when your kids scratch, the eggs are under their fingernails, and that's how worms continue to spread. So that's usually the way that you're looking at, do my kids have worms? It's itchy, it's uncomfortable. My youngest calls it tickling. She calls it, is it tickling? Yeah, my legs are tickling, my body's tickling. And I just think it might be centered around the anus, but those worms could actually be anywhere in her body. I know that my son used to, when he used to have a really extreme reaction if it was worms, and he would literally, like he was having an electric shock, like his body would go tense and he would like writhe off the bed. So just look out for these symptoms, because it's a super quick 24-hour knock them dead, and let's move forwards. And all of these behaviors fade away in 24 hours. So just saying, it's worth considering, particularly this time of year.
And because this time of year, I mean, as you touched on, but it's worth labouring the point, our kids are going to eat like double, triple, quadruple the sugar that they usually would eat. And so that can throw everything out. Like it can just tip what was in balance way out of balance in the body.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, if that's you, that was certainly a really big learning for me just as a parent. And just know if one child has worms, everybody has worms. Like that's just, if one person in our family has worms, we all get wormed because, you know, the degree to which your body can handle it, of course, we're all going to have different thresholds because we all have different biomes or, you know, body capabilities. But it's worth just going, okay, everybody's coming back to zero and off we go with however we want to change our lifestyle. Or
and would you be supporting the body with anything else, like after you've wormed?
Well, normally I would be doing diatomaceous earth, so I would just be sneaking that into yogurt or into smoothies, usually smoothies because you don't even know it's there in smoothies. It doesn't have a flavour, but it has kind of a gritty, powdery sort of texture to it. So, but as I said to you, my sister used to just mix it into a like juice, like a small little cup of juice and be like, down the hatch. Because her kids, for whatever reason, used to get worms like a lot. And because the kids, we went through the process of educating kids on what worms were. And I actually did that with my eldest too, particularly with my son, because he was more prone as well. And we, you know, Googled worms and we looked at their life cycles and we looked at what they did in the body and we learned about how they travel and we talked about the things that help worms survive and the things that, you know, kill them. And he was totally on board being a warrior to kill the worms. So, you know, taking that diatomaceous earth or making the choices that kill the worms or breed the worms was kind of a no-brainer for him, but it came through the education pathway. And that's what my sister had done with her children also. So, you know, even though I would say they were pretty picky eaters, they were happy to down the juice with diatomaceous earth. And it's like a teaspoon, you know, diluted into the juice. It's not like, we're not for little kids. We're not talking about a lot. For adults, it's about a tablespoon. And it has no flavour. It just has like a texture to it. And it's a wonderful silica and calcium supplement as well. So I actually just like am a huge advocate for diatomaceous earth.
Hot tips. I love them.
Yeah. So let's come back to how else we can support our children. And Bridgie, you'd said one of the things is to make sure that you have lots of padding around activities. What does that mean?
So for me, that means like recognizing when I might be trying to like run the gauntlet this time of year, like looking at, okay, well, what's reasonable or realistic for my children to be able to adapt to, given that they're already dysregulated here. So we had a big family Christmas thing, like 50, 60 people on Saturday. So I gave myself lots of slowness on Sunday. So to like, you know, let the children, you know, bounce their feelings off each other, to let the children kind of come back into the home, to kind of have conversations about people we took met and like, you know, what went on in the day, just to help them kind of move out of that experience and kind of be ready for the rest of the week. And so I would be, and similarly, like the days, for instance, when like we're going to go look at the Christmas lights. So I'm looking at, okay, well, what does my 2-year-old need to be able to be bright and ready for that? You know, so it'll be a slower day or a later nap for her to be able to go and see the Christmas lights. So I'm just looking at each child and going, okay, where are they at? Is this too much right now? Because I want them to be able to enjoy Christmas and us all enjoy Christmas and them not be off the Richter scale of dysregulation. So it might mean saying no to stuff, you know, to no to extra things that I want to fit into my week. And just like kind of keeping a pulse point on each of the kids and like what it is. I mean, I know now with my 2-year-old, Erin should probably be a lot better, you know, but because her stuff yesterday was snatching toys off her siblings and then like falling into a puddle of tears. And just general like increased sensitivity, which is not usually her.
That's when I think, you know, right? Like it's not regulated or dysregulated. It's, this is different to your usual pattern.
Yeah. Exactly. So like looking at things like that we can do on a physiological level, like what you've talked about with the sleep, with maybe deworming, but also looking at, is this child struggling to be in this environment? Like, so I could see my 5-year-old, really struggling to be, in the environment, and like she was on my back a lot when she wants to get on my back, I know she's looking for my body to help her regulate.
Oh, okay. So I would really like to labour this a little bit longer, because I know that your second, like my third, has neurodiverse
yes
aspects to her selfhood.
Mm-hmm.
How do you roll with her or carry her into or through? I mean, your Christmases sound huge. Like, I mean, my biggest Christmas is like 10 people. So you have...
Yeah, mine, I mean, I've got 35 cousins on one side, right? So
yeah, like, my goodness, it's like a whole event. Yeah.
Yes.
So how are you carrying a neurodiverse child into and through that experience?
So
can I just pinpoint and highlight, under the watchful gaze of family, who can often be the most judgmental?
Yes, exactly. Right. So what I'm doing, like my prep is just as much my children's prep for these events, actually probably even more, because what I notice that I find I'm coming up against is perceived judgments, because we'll all grapple with like where we perceive we might be judged by family, because I mean these are people who have known us since we were born often and have formed a view of who we are, and they also have a like we all do, like an investment cognitively in us continuing the pattern that they know us to be. Like we all do. As soon as somebody jumps out of the pattern and like out of their identity, it's like jarring. And so it's particularly jarring if you imagine, older people who don't have as much to talk about. So they're like gossiping about, the family. So I'm noticing where I've lost my center and I've taken myself into someone else's potential perception of me. So it's like, oh, no, come back. And so I have that kind of reminder in myself of like, sovereignty and like, allowing people to have whatever feelings that they have, but knowing who I am, things like that. And because the more solid I can be in myself, the more able I am to accept my children and however they are or are perceived, because I'm not attached to somebody else's expectation or perception, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of like thinking about that in advance and noticing where my thinking is going or where my anxieties might be, and like parenting those. And then I'm looking at, which child might struggle here and what kind of support might they need. So I'm expecting my 2-year-old will be overwhelmed, and so she might be closer to me, or she might, like struggle looking at people or making eye contact or wanting to go to people. So I'm kind of aware of that. My 5-year-old, giving her information about like the flow of the day and like what it's going to be like, and this might happen and this might happen, helping her understand like where we're sitting and our table and what she can do and not do, and just rolling with how she's processing it, which sometimes I can tell when she's processing or when she's struggling to process is when she's having a hard time making eye contact, when she wants me to pick her up all the time. And so largely I am rolling with lending my body to her in those times where I can. So I've worked on being able to do that. So that's like, I know that she'll hop on my back and we'll play a little bit, and that will help her. And I'll move like left to right to help her brain regulate, because she needs quite a bit of help with that. I also have like a little thing, which I know you did, which was kind of like wiggling like her arms to get her arms like spaghetti arms and helping and using them to cross the midline for her. So we were doing that there, and just noticing like kind of that edge where I go, oh, she's acting weird, or like, why isn't she like, like that, how you hit your old conditioning and it goes, why is she not behaving? Like you kind of have this like that part, and then the part that comes in and meets it and goes, she's struggling here, right? Like the intersection of the two.
Yes, I do.
And and sometimes we'll do that better than other times. Like I got triggered by my son who was getting jealous of the other kids' presents. And so like that brings in all of the stuff around gratitude and, being grateful for what you've got and like all of that. So sometimes we do that well, sometimes we do it not so well, and we'll hit our edge. But I think it's just being aware of the intersection of like ourselves and what we bring to those events, knowing that we've got such history, and our children and their experience of it, and how much we can meet our child in their experience of it without attachment to what they should or should not do, right? Like in the eyes of, you know, our family, I guess. This podcast is brought to you by Honey Club and Reimagining Motherhood, your spaces for intimacy and feminine embodiment and conscious parenting and inspiring motherhood. Come join us at julietanner.love and bridgetwood.life.
It's a lot to hold, though, isn't it?
It is a lot to hold, yeah.
Creating this whole world or creation of a world that at the same time as it's almost like holding that bubble, you're also co-creating with everyone who's there. Like it's a lot.
It's huge. Yeah. And that's also why I think as like mothers, we also need to be like constantly sort of checking in on where our capacity's at and where our energy's at, and like all the things we're talking about for our kids around sleep, we also need to kind of honor too. Like, so even this week, like I'm looking at like what presents still need to be wrapped, you know, and because I can have a habit like all mothers, right? Like all parents, where you're up till like so late.
Yeah.
Doing presents and all that kind of stuff. But if we don't balance that, then we're going to be slammed by Christmas and have zero capacity, like with our children. And so it's just like looking at, okay, well, what's reasonable for me to expect of myself as well, like in these few days, knowing that the intensity that my kids are going to bring me is going to be more.
Yeah.
And I can't hold that much if I am wrecked.
So what are you doing to look after yourself?
Earlier bedtime. Exercise. So I'm still exercising this week, like because it helps me so much mentally. Delegating. So like, you know, there's still stuff I've got to pick up. So getting my husband to pick some stuff up. And just, yeah, like checking in with, what do I need this week, or can this wait till next week, or, you know, what feels good right now, like what, and even with my kids and like my son bouncing off the wall now because it's school holidays. What do they need? What do I need to feel good so that everybody has an outlet? Just those kinds of questions, those kind of, and noticing if I'm getting like super irritated with them. What are my expectations? Am I expecting them to care about, you know, how much stuff I've got to do, right? And like the planning and the, you know, because I know lots of mothers like, you know, are wrestling with like the Christmas menu and how they're going to get that all done, plus the presents, plus the places they have to go, or maybe the house they need to clean if you're having Christmas at your house, like so many things. And so any little like normal child behavior can be an irritant to us getting those things done.
Yeah, it's true.
So like just having gentleness and grace for yourself, like, and that intensity, and what you can do to lengthen the space in between like your reaction to what your kids are doing, you know, and like, or largely, or rather the response in your body that is your activation and how you react. Like, so like lengthening just a little bit that space in between, you know, your body response and how you actually react, you know. And so that's things like, for me, like, you know, the breath. When I notice I'm getting irritated, I often sing. So I will often like sing like through my frustration, sing through transitions, because singing is such a powerful release, and also it improves vagal tone. So it actually helps us self-regulate. And my kids often, if it's a stupid song that I'm singing, that then brings them into connection, and it will be like the circuit breaker as well on like the behavior that feels hard.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. And then also like the squeezing my body, like which we've, you know, you and I talked about that a lot, like squeezing down my arms just to remember, a little bit like the weighted blanket. Like,
like a little blanket.
I've got a body. Like I'm in this body. I'm not in like the story from my childhood that's running right now. Because we'll all be running our childhood stories this time of year.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Like, because they're all getting pressed.
Yeah, it's folly to think that we're not.
Yeah. So like just a couple of those like nervous system practices help bring you back to now and out of the narrative.
That's such wonderful, I don't want to use the word advice because I actually kind of don't like that word, but that's such wonderful, just supportive words of a lived experience, aren't they?
Yeah, thanks. And I think also like opening up a dialogue with your partner too, like making sure that you both know that you are both going to head into your childhood narrative imprint wounding, and you both have awareness of that, so you can both bring each other to consciousness. like that is helpful, because then you're on the same team and there's a shared understanding, and that you can each feel into what each person needs. And so you can kind of sense they need to tap out for a bit, or that, or, you know, that you can articulate, or they can sense that you need to tap out for a bit, and that you're both, you know, having grace for each other's experience, recognizing that, yes, you're each parents, but you're also each going to be pulled back to being children in some of these moments.
What are the patterns that you recognize you're likely to come into contact with?
For me, it is be grateful for what you've got. Like, don't ask for too much. I think fun was like harder for my mum, like, you know, to really amplify the fun. So I have to, like, I come up against the part of me that wants to check out. Like, to actually, like, feel myself checking out of like presence. So, like, and having a visceral sense, oh, I'm going there, like I'm dissociating here.
Oh, that's so
moving into, like, so, you know, yesterday, like, it would have been so easy because the kids were like, I was feeling super annoyed about the intensity, particularly of my 8-year-old. You know, so I wanted, like, space. I wanted space away because I was feeling.
Yeah, you were recognizing you were on that edge.
Yeah. And so I think my husband and I both sensed this anyway. We moved into some attachment play with them, you know, and like we did that for like half an hour, where him and I crawled around the house and we were tigers, and like it was just like we bought like the high octane stuff, and like that was an example for me to move toward like that resistant pattern in my body, like that can come up at this time of year.
Gosh, that must have been hard though.
It was, and I could feel all of the ways that I wanted to leave, like in my body.
How do you stay?
How do I stay? How do I stay? I think my wife and my children being connected to themselves and not leaving themselves is so big that I will lead myself there, like, to meet it. Not all the time, right?
I feel that.
You know what I mean, though? Like I can see like what they look like. I can see how in their bodies and in the moment they are, and how much they love it, and how much it's medicine for them. That makes me want to do it, because the feedback that I'm getting from what this means to them is bigger than my resistance. So, and like, it's like anything, the more you do it, the more you want to do it. Like, and the more you do it, the more it becomes a repertoire that you can pull on. And like, my husband's so literate. Like, I joke with him, and like, it's like you've learned everything by osmosis. It's like if I've had the books here, and the practices and everything has just got into your nervous system, and you just know. But in reality, I think he's just more playful, and he just is genius at like choosing play as a way to move toward, you know, connection and discomfort and stuff like that. So it also helps a lot that he's quite supportive and will meet me in it or lead me into it, and you know, past my point of like, you know, I'm busy, right?
Yeah.
So we can always be busy. Like, there's endless shit to do.
Totes.
Endless. So, like, can we sometimes choose the circuit breaker in our imprint and in the family dynamic to create a different pathway?
That's a really cool share. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
So, ideals versus reality and helping our children through transitions.
So, ideals versus reality, that's kind of like the ideal that my child will be make lots of eye contact with people, and they'll really enjoy themselves, and they'll be a pleasure to be around, and they'll be gracious for what they receive, and they won't eat too much chocolate. Like, you know, like all of this, like, my child is a unicorn.
Yeah.
Versus the reality that my child might be really, really difficult to be in relationship with.
Yeah.
Really difficult.
Yeah.
And when they're difficult to be in relationship with, we naturally move into power over. and we naturally move into behaviors that like try to stifle our child because they're hard to be with. Like either they're hard to be with in terms of who they are to us, like, you know, we don't recognize them in that kind of like attitude, or like as my son will tip into like I don't care, like really tweenish behavior, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so like it really works me up.
Yeah.
And so
at 8 to 9 though, I find that a really brutal age.
I'm finding it brutal.
Just for all you parents out there, also just know they do come through it. But I think it's hard because they're still such babies in one way, and yet they're trying on these personalities of a, you know, 15, 16-year-old, and it's like the clash of those two things I find excruciating.
Yeah. And so with that, I really try to take myself to that. What would it have been like to be 8? You know, like and to really see that wrestle as something beautiful that I can lean into, as opposed to something that I feel aversive to. So the reality of, excuse me, the reality of like sometimes we're just not going to like them. And so, but how can we still love them? Like I can not like you and love you. And so like that wrestle, and I think the bigger the fantasy we have on how our children are going to be at Christmas and how they're going to receive their gifts and how they're going to appreciate all that we do, the more we have attachment to that and attachment to results or outcomes based on what we're going to do or not do, the harder it is, because they bring us the nightmare. They bring us the other side that we hadn't reconciled, which is that for every fantasy about Christmas being the most wonderful time of the year, it is also the darkest, dankest, most challenging time for many, many families.
Totally.
Many families. And, you know, the more you build it up, the more some people will crash it down, or some people have to crash it down, whether that's a child in your family, whether that's someone in your broader dynamic. When we create a caricature of a particular day to be all of these wonderful things, it cannot be. It just can't. It's not how the world, it doesn't contain any duality, which is what the universe is organized around. So if we can't accept the duality within ourselves at this time of year, then we're really not going to accept it within our children.
Yeah, it's really true. It's really true.
What would you say around ideal versus reality?
Oh, well, you know, I have Gwen. She shatters any ideal you could possibly hold. So I've just learned to not hold any. In every family, there's one.
Well, tell us about that, because
well,
you know, she's just turned 4, right? So she's a pop.
Yeah, she's like 4 and nearly 4.5 actually. But she's a little bit wild, and I think I've said many times before, she's the one child that I have not actively squished that wildishness in. Like I can see my deculturalization over the course of my 4 children, and I can see that play out in my 4 children, which is fascinating. And I have to watch myself to not slide into guilt on
what with the other children, do you mean, or
yeah, taking the lens on how I mean, everything's a co-creation and everything is perfect in its creation, right? So it's a limited thought to perceive that there are more drawbacks than benefits to my elder children who I have, in inverted commas, through my current lens, squished their wildishness. Right? So it's also flawed thinking based on my current belief system and the way in which I'm seeing the world. It's something I'm traversing at the moment.
Yeah.
So what I'm careful of is not judging myself through judging my children for the culturalized behaviors that I see in them that are simply not present in my 4th.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So I always find parenting Gwen like a bit of a process of observing myself in society in a way that I didn't have the nervous system regulation to do with my other children. So she like will always say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing according to society's rules. And I always have to sit there and be like, yep, I'm that child's mother. That's me.
Yeah.
And love her through that, not judge her, get angry at her or at myself. So it's always a practice with Gwen. And it's one, actually, there's a part of me that enjoys, because I can see that that's an edge for me, and I'm okay to massage that edge within myself, like you and I do all the time, right? The place you stop is your glass ceiling. So what happens when you move beyond it? Anyway, so for instance, we finished up kinder, and the kinder teachers always give the kids a book. And for my other 3 children, it's been a magical experience. Like, the teachers have chosen a beautiful book for them, and that book is written in, love their kinder teachers, and it sits on it, like, we read it before Christmas, like the whole thing. So Gwen gets this present, and she looks at it and she's kind of flapping it around. She goes, "Well, I hope this is not a book." And Nick and I sit there going, "Oh dear, what is about to happen next?" So she opens this thing, and so she goes, "Oh my God, it's a book. Who would give a book?" I'm going to tell them you shouldn't give a book. Like this. And Nick and I were like, "Oh dear God." So that's just one of the many experiences where there's no filter. And the way that Gwen sees the world is the way that she sees the world, and the value system that she has. And she's more than happy for everyone to witness her in her value system.
Yes.
So we just kind of, now I have this sense of like, of course that's what she said. Like, of course, because that's what a Gwen would do. So holding any ideal is just something that I've really learned to let go of. And I think also having a neurodiverse child who moves much slower in the world also forces you to have to re-evaluate how you're moving through those environments. So it has to be slower. It has to be more buffered. I also know the more that I think that I've planned for everything, usually the more I get sideswiped by something. So best just to be open to being with what is. So that's usually how I've worked with it. And also I just know that, Gwen's going to do that stuff. And instead of getting caught up in it and making it mean something, I can just see the beauty and the value and the snapshot that is, and love the radicalism that she presents.
Yeah. Which is one of the biggest things as mothers, to actually be with it. I mean, like Sylvie's that often for me. Although, I mean, each child takes up that role, depending also on the level of my charge around it. Like, if you've got a big thing about being gracious and appreciative, then you're going to have the child like Gwen, who does that. Although, the instances like that, which take you to all of your social programming and, that threat of being outcast or perceived to be ungracious, like all of that's going to come up, all of it.
Yeah.
When you hold yourself in it without like challenging your child, which I mean, I struggle with.
Well, it's a big deal, isn't it? Yeah, it's a big deal. So the other thing that I would say is our Christmas Day, our personal family experience has always been that we do the rush of Christmas presents, and then we just go to the beach. And I do still believe that has and continues to be the most wonderful nervous system regulation we could possibly all gift ourselves, because we're on sand that's super sensory and regulation just on your feet or on your bottom or like wherever you are on the sand. It's very, very sensory. We have every year swum in the sea. So you're in the sea again, salt water, nervous system regulation, body regulation. And we spend 2-3 hours down at the beach together, just hanging out and playing. And that has always been a game changer for our Christmas Day. So if you're at Seaford Beach on Christmas morning, I will see you there, because we're there every year, and it is always magic. And that has been and will continue to be something that I never let go of, because I can see the value in, by the time we're ready to come home, get dressed and do the rush out the door to get somewhere, everybody's able to move through that process because no one's stuck.
It's like no man left behind.
And it becomes a really beautiful anchor that like the kids either like are aware of on some level that's going to be there for them, to hold.
Yeah.
Such safety in ritual like that.
Yeah. So I would really offer to you, what is the family ritual that you can do that creates the pause for regulation? Because that has always been something that's been really beautiful for my family. So, and just remember, you're always going to have the kids that are inappropriate like that. It just has to be.
Yeah.
And how can you just laugh and humor regulate yourself through that? Like, that gets to be really beautiful too.
I love that reminder. Yeah, and just expect it. And as soon as you're expecting it, it takes the edge off it because you're not trying to run away from it then.
Yeah. So best of luck, wonderful parents. Remember your gut health.
Yes.
You're going away. Take worming tablets with you.
And just sleep.
Yeah, and just sleep. Yeah, however you're going to roll with getting better quality sleep and more sleep pre-midnight, because it is worth so much more than after midnight. That you've got lots of padding around activities, that you have time either side to expect big feelings to help them move into the transition and to help them discharge and come back into connection. So either side of those activities. And remembering that we're all going to meet our childhood perceptions or lenses on Christmas and our ideals versus the reality of the co-creation of family. So to hold yourself with a level of humour so that you can love yourself and your children through that.
Yeah, beautiful way to end it. So to connect with you, Jules?
Is julietenner.love. And you, Bridge?
bridgetwood.life. You can find us at nourishingthemother.com.au. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
Have a beautiful Christmas, and we will see you I'm forgetting my lines now. What are my lines?
We'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers of your mothering journey.
Wonderful. We'll see you.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.